Ukraine has created a Winchester drone with 2 guns to combat Russian drones, Forbes writes. Drones are constantly operating along the front lines in Ukraine. They perform reconnaissance, artillery fire adjustment, cargo transportation, and even strike the enemy with ammunition or direct contact. With both sides actively producing up to 100,000 drones per month, destroying enemy drones has become a critical task, using radio jamming, protective nets, and shooting down drones with firearms. The Ukrainian military is increasingly using its own drones to destroy Russian ones. They are used for aerial ramming strikes, dropping nets, or even direct weapon attacks. A new development is equipping drones with dual guns. As analyst Andrew Perpetua noted, the Ukrainian drone has 2 guns. Mounting weapons on drones is nothing new, but using 2 guns is an innovation. The Ukrainian Defenders Assistance Fund is raising funds to equip units with Winchester drones. This design makes practical sense. Although the guns don't have much stopping power, their wide range increases the chances of hitting, which is critical when fighting maneuverable targets. A few bullets are often enough to destroy a drone. During recent discussions about drones in the US, Senator Charles Scott noted, "Perhaps a gun would be an appropriate legal weapon to use against a drone." This is confirmed by experience at the front, where both Ukrainian and Russian units actively use rifles. Due to the lack of weapons, the military, including the Russians, sometimes ask for help from civilians. One occupier appealed to the Russians in the spring, "Please help us with pump-action shotguns. Any crap will do." However, for infantry, the main problem is the proximity to the drone. The time to react is limited. Mounting guns on drones allows the Ukrainians to destroy Russian drones early on before they become a threat to ground forces. The war in Ukraine was essentially the first war with such active use of drones, from air to ground and even sea assets. Ukraine destroyed enemy infantry, equipment and ships with the help of such systems. In Ukraine, even the unmanned systems forces were created. The commander of this branch of the military is hero of Ukraine, Vadim Sukharevsky. The military man entered the history of the Russian-Ukrainian war as the first officer of the armed forces of Ukraine, under whose command fire was opened to defeat Russian militants near Slavyansk in April 2014. Ukrainian manufacturers are actively developing this industry. For example, it was recently reported that Ukraine has completed the testing stage of new UAVs with fiber optic communication. They are capable of overcoming enemy electronic warfare systems.
A new Ukrainian mechanized brigade and its Leopard 2 tanks could strengthen the defense of Pokrovsk just before a possible Russian offensive, writes Forbes. Christmas passed in Pokrovsk in an uneasy silence. The city, an important transport hub in the Donetsk region of eastern Ukraine, had a population of about 60,000 before Russia began its war against Ukraine in February 2022. Now, there are very few civilians left in the city, mostly Ukrainian army troops. There is an unpleasant silence in the city, the calm before the storm, shared volunteer fighter Denis Kryshov. This storm has a name, the Russian Army's 90th Guards Tank Division. It is a key element of Russia's powerful ground forces, which include dozens of brigades and regiments across 2 field armies, totaling up to 70,000 troops. These forces are advancing towards Pokrovsk, seeking to capture the city as the war enters its 4th year. The Ukrainian garrison in and around Pokrovsk is considerably smaller, up to 10 brigades, each with no more than 2,000 soldiers. However, the Ukrainians are receiving important support. One of the newest brigades of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the 155th Mechanized Brigade, is deployed near the city. It includes German Leopard 2 tanks and French Tsar howitzers, which the brigade received after exercises in France and Poland. Russian forces continue to advance towards Pokrovsk. The nearest units are only 6.4 kilometers from the city, along the 1,287-kilometer front line. Russian troops are conducting offensive operations both in western Russia and in the north, east and south of Ukraine. In the Kursk region, Russian attacks have a separate objective, but their results may affect the future battle for Pokrovsk. According to the Ukrainian Center for Defense Strategies, Russian units south of Pokrovsk are advancing to establish a defensive line that could keep Ukrainian forces from strengthening defenses or breaking the blockade of the city. Ukrainian forces will likely try to counter this by moving several brigades and battalions. After this possible maneuver, another important stage could occur. A short Russian offensive north of Pokrovsk, aimed at partially encircling the city before the main battle for the transport hub begins. By then, the 155th Mechanized Brigade should be fully deployed in Pokrovsk, with German tanks, French howitzers, and 2,000 new troops at its disposal. Whether these forces will be enough to hold the city is a key question in this phase of the war, which has already killed and maimed more than 1 million people, most of them Russians. Let us recall that analysts from the American Institute for the Study of War have stated that Russian troops are gradually advancing near Pokrovsk, but it is not yet known whether they intend to capture the city or plan to advance to the administrative borders of the Donetsk and the Dnipropetrovsk regions as part of the Kremlin's political and informational goal of capturing the entire Donetsk region. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin may have tasked the military with territorial conquests rather than capturing key settlements, analysts say. Geolocation data shows that the occupiers are within 10 kilometers of the administrative border, and Putin may be pressuring the Russian military command to advance towards the border rather than encircle Pokrovsk, the analysts say. It will be difficult for Russia to wage war after 2025 due to economic problems, predicts former commander of the US Army in Europe, Ben Hodges. He expressed his opinion on this matter in an interview with Kiev 24 TV channel, answering the question of whether the war in Ukraine will end in 2025. Everything suggests that Russia cannot hold on economically after 2025. They have very serious problems in the economy. I would not say that they would not be able to continue, but it would be very, very difficult for them to do so, Hodges noted. According to him, much depends on Western countries and the United States. We must demonstrate that we will not leave Ukraine until Ukraine wins this conflict, the military man emphasized. Hodges did not undertake to make predictions regarding the actions of the new administration of US President Donald Trump to end the war in Ukraine. The Trump administration is very difficult in terms of understanding what they will do. They promise to do a lot of things on day one. There may be a flood of announcements, but the big announcements will require action from Congress and cooperation from other countries. I think the administration will be more focused on domestic issues at the beginning. However, this will be an administration that we have not seen before. There will be some very different procedures and protocols. It's difficult to make any predictions, Hodges said. With the purchasing power of the Russian ruble hitting the lowest point since March 2022, the economic toll of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine becomes glaring. Russia's expanding spending on the war has fueled inflation, prompting Russia's central bank to hike its interest rate to the highest level since the early 2000s, 21%. To rein in consumer prices, inflation remained high regardless of the rate hike, speeding up to over 1% in the first 3 weeks of November and pushing the year-to-year numbers to over 8%. In the wake of the economic challenges the country has faced over the past year, the US government's November 21 decision to impose new sanctions on dozens of Russian banks has proven hard for the country's economy to swallow. Russia is currently facing an impossible economic conundrum because of the rapid increase in military expenditure and the Western sanctions. Anders Aslan, a Swedish economist specializing in post-Soviet countries, says,